This is one of those questions that perhaps we don't want to hear the answer to. How dirty is your microphone? And really, how dirty is your all-around gear? So then, we're on a mission to not only test that, but to find out exactly how unhealthy is it to be one of those mic eater people. Whoa. And we're going to leave no stone unturned. Mic socks, pop filters, stage-used mics. Oh, that one's going to be interesting, especially for open mic nights.
Don't stop till they get enough. Boom!
And of course, I'm going to throw in a couple studio extras like a mixer and even the dreaded keyboard. My hopes are high for that one. So then, let's see how some of this stuff played out. First up, I kind of wanted a control sample, one that would show me how dirty a mic is before it had even been used. Kind of like the baseline specs before this stuff gets dirtied up. And as luck would have it, I had this Shure Nexodyne come in the mail. So I brought it out to a show completely unopened, and I took a sample from it. Now, if you saw my review of this microphone, you will know what show I'm talking about, with Lady Soul at Buster's Bar and Grill here in Ottawa, Ontario. But before giving her the mic for the show, I gave it a quick swab, and we're going to come back to that because in a perfect world, that swab should have been as clean as possible. So that's our control. Now, at the time, the lead singer Carrie also let me swab her everyday Carrie mic, the one she usually uses for her shows. And that should stand out as a stark comparison to both samples from the Nexodyne. And then after the show, I grabbed the sample from the stage-used Shure and I swabbed that at the same time. So we're going to get to see the differences of a mic just used over a mic that was used over time but wasn't fresh off the stage. That's going to be interesting. Now, we're going to come back to how those samples turned out in just a few, don't you worry. But first, let's look at a few other samples I took from my own studio. So when I was coming up with this video idea, I had to kind of walk around my studio and see the stuff that I interacted with the most. And there's a couple things that stood out for me. First up is my PodMic USB. That is my everyday mic that I use on my main work desk. This thing gets a lot of use a lot of the time, and as luck would have it, it has a sock on it. So that should be interesting and possibly gross. We're going to test both the sock and underneath the sock to see how much the pop filter actually blocks out. Next up, we have my pop filter that I use for all of my testing, right here. This thing again gets a load of work in. Swabbing this had me a bit scared though, because my lips have actually been on this. Next is my main interface for my Mac, which is the Rodecaster Pro 2, and it's a great candidate. I made sure I swabbed both the screen as well as the main fader and a few other things. And lastly, my keyboard, which gets daily use for hours on end. This is the scariest one for me, and I know this thing has stuff on it. Ugh. So then, with all that, I sealed up the samples, left them in a bag, in a box, right up against a window to get as much heat as possible on it, which means it should be faster growth. Although it's not too hot in Canada right now, so we'll see how that goes. So then, let's open that box up and see what kind of stuff we're actually contending with. After doing all of that, I'm not sure if I'm surprised or not, but if you think you know which one of them is the dirtiest, pause it here and comment below. See if you can get it right. So then basically I'm going to go to left to right from what I have set up here. First up is the clean Nexodyne that I swabbed right after opening it for the first time. And I gotta say, props to Shure for sending me something without any germs on it. Now, I'm not super surprised, but I also wasn't completely sure what was gonna come from that test. Which leads us to the Nexodyne after a full night of being sung into by Carrie from Lady Soul. And, well, it's kind of what you expect. Not as dirty as it could be, but also definitely used. But then the first shock comes after that. Remember, I swabbed her everyday mic, the Beta 58A, and considering this isn't a new mic, this thing came out rather clean when you consider. Now, I mean, when you put it side by side with the used Nexodyne, this isn't a result that I expected. Anyways, next up, we have my pop filter, the one that I do all my plosive testing with. And another surprise is it came out cleaner than I thought it would. This thing gets some heavy rotation, so I wonder if the fabric just lets stuff go through. I'm not sure, but I was not expecting this result. Though it was worse off than my mic sock on the PodMic USB, which also scored rather low on the gross scale. And I was really surprised that underneath the sock was actually super clean. It does kind of make sense, though good to know stuff isn't getting through. And this just leaves us with the two final ones, the keyboard and the Rodecaster Pro 2. So if you guessed either one of those, it's kind of 50-50 from here on out. Now we're going to start with the keyboard. And yes, this is pretty gross. Not going to lie, I thought it was going to be worse though. Interesting. And following that up, the nastiest thing that I tested is that of the Rodecaster Pro 2, which just like, I wouldn't have guessed that came off my board, but now I'm questioning absolutely everything. So perhaps this is a good reminder that it's always a good time to break out the disinfectant wipes. But I think one of the biggest things I took from this is how much cleaner the mics are than I first thought. No, I wouldn't be getting closer than the 2 inches recommended, but it also helps some of the fears that shared mics are super gross. It would seem, in fact, that shared mixers are the worst culprit. And from somebody that worked in the radio industry as a host, that's not only surprising, but also a bit scary. So perhaps if you do have a shared studio environment, having some of those disinfectant wipes around might be a pretty good idea. Speaking of, I think I should go clean some stuff. Cheers.